I'm Holly, 25 female. I'm a graphic designer, living in a city that buzzes with more energy than I ever felt in the sterile, silent suburb I grew up in. For the past 3 years, I've lived in an apartment my father pays for, a gilded cage with a great view, working a job I found for myself. I've been navigating that tricky space between the financial dependence he enforces and the personal independence I crave. He always believed that if he held the purse strings, he held me. For a long time, he was right. But he made one catastrophic miscalculation, and it all centered around a phone call from halfway across the world, a set of car keys, and a lie so audacious it would end up costing him everything he thought he controlled. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My father, Colin Anderson, was a man who didn't just walk into a room, he assessed it for weaknesses. At 55, he was a titan in the world of investment banking, a place where fortunes were made and lost on whispers and cold, hard numbers. He applied the same principles to his family life. Everything was an asset or a liability. My achievements were assets to be displayed at dinner parties. My desires, if they didn't align with his portfolio of expectations for my life, were liabilities to be managed and mitigated. After my mother passed away when I was a teenager, his control tightened like a vice. He remarried a woman, Brenda, who was perfectly suited to his world. She was an interior designer whose primary skill was decorating their life to look flawless, regardless of the cracks spreading beneath the surface. Brenda was a partner in his control, a smiling enforcer who would gently remind me how much my father did for me, which was code for how much I owed him. The cage they built for me wasn't made of iron bars, but of guilt, obligation, and the quiet, crushing weight of financial dependency. The rent for my downtown apartment, the insurance on my health plan, even my phone bill, all were filtered through his accounts. It was his way of reminding me that no matter how far I ran, the leash was still attached to his hand. But every prisoner dreams of escape, and my escape plan was forged in steel, rust, and gasoline. It was a 1968 Ford Mustang, which I found wasting away in a barn 3 counties over when I was 19. I bought it with money I'd saved from years of freelance design work I'd done in secret throughout high school and college. It was a wreck, a hollowed-out shell of its former glory. To my father, it was a liability, a tetanus risk, a waste of good money on garbage. To me, it was a promise. For 6 years, that car was my sanctuary. I learned to weld, to rebuild an engine, to wire a dashboard. I spent weekends covered in grease, my knuckles bruised and bleeding, turning that piece of garbage into a gleaming, midnight blue masterpiece. It was the one part of my life my father couldn't touch, couldn't understand, and therefore couldn't control. He had bought me a sensible, boring gray sedan for my college graduation, a car he registered under his name as the primary owner. For insurance purposes, he'd said. That was the car I was supposed to drive, the one that fit his image of a respectable daughter. The Mustang, however, was mine. The title was in my name, paid for with my own money, the restoration funded by every spare dollar I earned. The paperwork was tucked away in a fireproof box under my bed, my own declaration of independence. My best friend, Thomas Bell, understood. We'd known each other since kindergarten, and he was the only person who saw the full extent of Colin's suffocating influence. Thomas was in his final year of law school, sharp and methodical, with a fierce sense of justice that was often aimed squarely at my father's behavior. "He doesn't own you, Holly," he'd say, watching me meticulously polish the chrome bumper of the Mustang in the garage I rented a few blocks from my apartment. "He just rents the space you occupy." Thomas was my confidant, my cheerleader, and as I would soon find out, the most crucial ally I could ever have. The garage was my true home. It smelled of oil and metal and potential. It was where I could breathe, where the carefully constructed persona of Holly Anderson, dutiful daughter, fell away, leaving just Holly, the woman who could bring a dead engine back to life. My father had never once set foot in it. He didn't even know its address. That ignorance was a small victory, but it was mine. The week it all began, Colin and Brenda were preparing for a 2-week trip to Europe. It was billed as a second honeymoon, but I knew it was more of a victory lap. Colin had just closed a massive merger at his firm, and the trip was his reward. The air in their sprawling, minimalist mansion was thick with mug satisfaction. Brenda was agonizing over which designer gowns to pack, while Colin was on the phone barking orders and finalizing details, ensuring his empire would continue to run smoothly in his absence. I had been summoned for a farewell dinner, an obligatory ritual of feigned family harmony. "Holly, darling," Brenda said, air-kissing my cheek. "Do try to keep your little projects from taking over your life while we're gone. Your father worries." What she meant was, don't do anything that might require him to think about you for even a second. I smiled and nodded, the familiar mask of compliance slipping easily into place. "Of course," I replied. "Have a wonderful time." My father cornered me by the bar, a glass of expensive scotch in his hand. "Everything settled with you?" he asked, his tone less of a question and more of a statement. "Apartment is fine, no major expenses coming up." It was his pre-trip checklist. I was an item to be ticked off, a variable to be controlled. "Everything's fine, Dad," I said, my voice even. He gave a curt nod, satisfied. "Good, we have some big changes coming when we get back. Big, positive changes for the family." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His smiles never did. They were tools designed to disarm or intimidate. I felt a familiar knot of dread tighten in my stomach. Big changes in his world usually meant a decision had been made without my consultation, one that would benefit him and alter the course of my life. I asked what he meant, but he just waved a dismissive hand. "All in good time. You'll love it. It's for the best, for all of us." He then clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture meant to convey fatherly affection, but that felt more like a brand, a marking of his property. I left their house that night with his words echoing in my head, a sense of foreboding clinging to me like the city fog. I drove my Mustang home, the deep rumble of its V8 engine a reassuring counterpoint to the anxiety churning within me. For a moment, gripping the worn leather of the steering wheel, I felt safe. I was in control. It was an illusion, of course. A beautiful, powerful illusion that was about to be shattered by a single phone call from 3,000 miles away. The first week of their trip was blissfully silent. No check-in calls, no emails demanding an update on my progress, no passive-aggressive texts from Brenda about a new restaurant I simply must try because it's where people like us go. The silence was a balm. I poured myself into my work, taking on extra freelance projects, feeling the thrill of earning money that wouldn't be funneled into an account my father could scrutinize. I spent my evenings at the garage, tuning the Mustang's carburetor until it purred like a contented lion. With every turn of the wrench, I felt the knots of his control loosening. Thomas came by one evening with pizza and beer, and we sat on overturned crates, talking about his upcoming bar exam and my dream of one day opening my own design studio, maybe even one that specialized in custom car aesthetics. "You could do it, you know," he said, wiping grease from a smudge on my cheek with his thumb. "You have the talent and the drive. You just need to cut the last cord." I knew he was right. The cord was thick and made of financial wire, and the thought of severing it was both exhilarating and terrifying. My father had meticulously engineered my life to ensure that the prospect of true independence felt like stepping off a cliff. But for the first time, standing in my own space, surrounded by the fruits of my own labor, I felt like I could grow wings on the way down. I was starting to believe in myself. That was my first mistake. I had let my guard down. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was at my desk, sketching out a logo for a new client when my phone buzzed with an international number. It was my father. My heart did a familiar little nervous flutter, a conditioned response from a lifetime of his summons. "Hi, Dad," I answered, trying to sound cheerful and untroubled. "How's Europe?" There was a crackle of static, then his voice, clipped and devoid of any warmth. "Holly, I'm not calling for a chat. I'm calling to inform you of a decision." My blood ran cold. That was his signature phrase. It was the verbal equivalent of a gavel coming down. It meant a verdict had been reached and there was no appeal. "What decision?" I asked, my own voice barely a whisper. "Brenda and I have decided to stay," he said. "We're not coming back, we're relocating to our London office. Permanently." the words hit me like a physical blow. Stay? Permanently? My mind scrambled to catch up. The merger, the victory lap. It wasn't a vacation, it was an exit strategy. What are you talking about? I stammered. The house, my apartment, everything. Everything is being handled, he cut in, his impatience palpable even across the Atlantic. The house has been sold. The movers are coming. At the end of the week to clear out our things. Your apartment lease is being terminated at the end of the month. We're leaving tomorrow on a flight to New York to sign the final papers, then we're gone for good. My throat felt tight, and I couldn't seem to draw a full breath. He had sold the house I grew up in without so much as a mention. He was cutting me loose, severing the lease on my home with the same casual indifference he'd show when canceling a magazine subscription. But it was his next words that stopped my heart completely. And don't worry about that car of yours. I managed to get a fantastic price for it. It's already been sold. The buyer wired the money this morning. A roaring sound filled my ears. The car, my Mustang, the one thing that was mine, truly mine. What? I choked out. You sold my car? I could almost hear him shrug. Yes, a collector. Paid a premium for it, sight unseen, based on the photos I sent. It was a smart move, Holly. Liquidated a depreciating asset and added a nice little sum to your trust fund, which, by the way, I will continue to manage. A wave of nausea washed over me. The trust fund was another one of his control mechanisms, a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow I could only reach if I followed his exact path. He had sold my sanctuary, my freedom, my soul, and for what? To pad a bank account he already controlled. You can't do that, I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. The car is in my name, the title is here. With me, you can't sell it without the title. For the first time, there was a slight pause on his end. Then he laughed. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound. Oh, Holly, so naive. Do you really think a little piece of paper matters? I'm your father, I have power of attorney. I've had it since you turned 18. I can sign for you, make decisions for you. It's all perfectly legal. I took care of it. Power of attorney. I vaguely remembered signing a stack of financial documents he'd put in front of me years ago, telling me it was just standard procedure for your inheritance. I'd been young and trusting. I hadn't read the fine print. I had handed him the keys to my entire life without even realizing it. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it left me breathless. He hadn't just sold my car, he had used my own trust against me. He had weaponized my love. The new owner will be by with a flatbed truck to pick it up on Friday, he continued, his voice returning to its businesslike clip. Just make sure the keys are in it. We're leaving tomorrow. Your car has already been sold. Bye. And then he was gone. The line went dead. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. He hadn't asked how I felt. He hadn't offered any comfort or explanation beyond his own cold logic. He had simply detonated a bomb in the middle of my life and walked away without looking back. My world, which had felt so full of promise just minutes before, had been reduced to rubble. I looked around my apartment, at the design books on the shelves, the sketches pinned to the wall, the life I was so proud of building. It all felt like a sham, a movie set that was about to be torn down. He had taken everything. My home, my future, my family, and now the one thing that symbolized my hope of escaping him. The tears that had been welling finally broke free, hot and angry. I wasn't just sad, I was furious. A deep, primal rage began to burn through the shock. He thought he had won. He thought he had liquidated his final asset and tied up all the loose ends. But as I sat there, shaking with a mixture of grief and fury, a tiny, cold thought began to form in the back of my mind. A detail. A small, seemingly insignificant detail that he, in his monumental arrogance, had overlooked. I slowly stood up, my tears drying on my face, and a strange, wild laugh bubbled up from my chest. It was a broken sound, but it was a laugh nonetheless. I walked over to my desk and said to the empty room, to the ghost of my father on the phone, "But you forgot one thing." He had asked, "What are you talking about?" And now I had the answer. I laughed out loud because the car he sold was actually not the one he thought it was. The initial wave of rage and despair subsided, leaving behind a cold, crystalline clarity. My father operated on assumptions. He assumed his power was absolute, that his knowledge was complete, and that I was still the compliant little girl who signed documents without reading them. His entire plan hinged on these assumptions, and that was where I would find my leverage. The Mustang was my soul, but the gray sedan he'd bought me for graduation was his mark of ownership. It was a perfectly respectable, mind-numbingly boring car that I used for errands and for visiting him and Brenda, because showing up in the roaring, rebellious Mustang always earned me a lecture on making a scene. My father, a man obsessed with appearances and control, had put the C. Dan's title in his name. He was the lien holder, the primary name on the registration. I was merely the authorized driver. He saw it as his car, one that he graciously allowed me to use. He paid the insurance on it, a fact he reminded me of every 6 months when the bill came due. It was another link in the chain he used to bind me. When he'd said on the phone, "That car of yours," he had meant the only car of mine he acknowledged, the only one that existed in his financial ecosystem. The Mustang was a ghost to him, a dirty hobby he chose to ignore. My mind raced, connecting the dots. He was in London. He needed to sell the car quickly and remotely. He couldn't show it to a buyer in person, so what would he do? He'd go online. He would have used pictures. A surge of adrenaline shot through me. I grabbed my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard. He was a creature of habit, always using the same high-end auction sites for his watches and art. I checked the first one, then the second. On the third, a site for classic and collector cars, I found it. The listing was just a few days old, marked as sold. The headline read, "Pristine 1968 Midnight Blue Mustang, a true American classic." My heart hammered against my ribs. The photos were stunning, professionally lit, showing every perfect curve, the gleaming chrome, the immaculate engine I had rebuilt with my own hands. They were the photos from a car show I'd entered last summer, photos I had proudly posted on my portfolio website as an example of my design and restoration work. He had stolen them. The manipulative genius of his plan was sickening. He had advertised my beautiful, valuable, and highly sought-after Mustang, but the car he had actually sold, the one for which he held the legal title and could transfer ownership, was the worthless gray sedan. He had committed fraud on a massive scale. He had used deceptive images to sell an item, and the item delivered would not match the description. The buyer wasn't just buying a car, they were buying a lie. He had gotten a premium price, no doubt, likely tens of thousands of dollars for a vehicle that was worth a fraction of that. The money had been wired. The deal was done. The buyer was expecting a showpiece and was about to receive a generic, used four-door sedan. I felt a surge of grim satisfaction. My father, the master of the fine print, the man who read every clause of every $100 million deal, had gotten so caught up in his own arrogance that he'd created a legal nightmare for himself. He had forgotten one crucial detail: the vehicle identification number. The VIN, the car's unique fingerprint. The VIN on the sedan's title he was going to use to transfer ownership would not match the VIN of the 1968 Mustang in the pictures. It was an open and shut case of bait and switch. I took screenshots of everything: the auction page, the stolen photos from my website, the glowing description full of details he would never know, like the specific type of custom headers I'd installed. Evidence. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was from exhilaration. He had handed me the weapon I needed to dismantle his entire world. I pulled the fireproof box out from under my bed and opened it. There it was, the official title for the 1968 Ford Mustang, crisp and clean. My name, Holly Anderson, was printed in clear, bold letters. Ownership, sole, no liens, no co-signers. It was a legal fact as solid as the engine block in the car itself. He had no power of attorney over this. He couldn't sign this away. The power of attorney I had signed years ago was likely a general one, allowing him to manage my finances and assets listed within his purview, the trust fund, the accounts he'd set up for me. But the Mustang was an asset he didn't even know I legally owned. It was off his books, and therefore it was out of his reach. His entire scheme was based on a lie, not just to the buyer, but to himself. He believed he owned me and everything I touched. That belief was about to cost him dearly. I picked up my phone and dialed the one person I knew would understand not just the legalities, but the deep, personal violation of it all. "Thomas," I said when he answered, my voice steady and cold. I need your help. My father just sold my car. There was a pause on the other end. The Mustang? How? He can't. The title is in your name. I know, I interrupted, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my face. That's the beautiful part. He doesn't know that he can't. He sold a ghost. And I think it's time we introduced him to the concept of consequences. Thomas was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the legal gears turning in his brilliant mind. Then he spoke, and his voice was filled with a mix of fury on my behalf and sheer, unadulterated excitement. "Oh, this is going to be good," he said. "Meet me at the coffee shop in an hour. Bring every piece of paper you have. We're going to draft a response he won't see coming." As I hung up the phone, I looked at the title in my hand. It was more than just a piece of paper. It was my emancipation document. My father had written the script for my downfall, but he'd accidentally cast me as the hero. He thought he was closing a chapter, but he had just given me the opening line to a brand new story. Mine. The illusion of his control was about to come crashing down, and I was going to be the one to light the fuse. The coffee shop was a neutral ground, a place of comforting aromas and the low hum of conversations that had nothing to do with my imploding life. I arrived first, spreading out my arsenal on the small wooden table. The printouts of the online auction, the screenshots of my portfolio, and the original title to my Mustang. When Thomas arrived, he wasn't just carrying his law books. He had a look of grim determination on his face that I'd seen only a few times, usually when he was arguing a mock trial case he was particularly passionate about. He saw the documents on the table and gave a low whistle. "He really did it," he said, shaking his head in disbelief as he scanned the fraudulent listing. "He used your photos, your work, to sell his piece of junk. The sheer arrogance is breathtaking." He sat down and immediately went into lawyer mode, his focus narrowing, his questions sharp and precise. "The power of attorney," he started. "Do you have any idea what you signed?" I shook my head, a flush of shame creeping up my neck. I was 18. He told me it was for my trust fund to manage it until I was 30. It was a huge stack of papers. I trusted him. Thomas held up a hand. "Don't blame yourself, Holly. That's what people like him count on." Financial abuse often starts with exploiting trust, not breaking down doors. But it might not matter. A G. General power of attorney doesn't give him carte blanche to commit fraud. And selling one asset while advertising another is the very definition of fraud. He spent the next hour poring over the documents, making notes on a yellow legal pad, his brow furrowed in concentration. He explained the legal ramifications in a way I could understand. My father had likely committed wire fraud by using the internet to conduct a fraudulent transaction across state or even international lines. He'd engaged in false advertising and deceptive trade practices. The buyer had a rock-solid case to sue him for damages, not just for the purchase price, but potentially for punitive damages as well, given the malicious nature of the deception. "He's insulated himself in London, thinking he's untouchable," Thomas explained, tapping his pen on the table. "But the transaction took place here. The assets, both the real one and the fake one, are here. Jurisdiction is here. He's not as safe as he thinks." My primary concern, however, wasn't the lawsuit. It was the imminent arrival of a flatbed truck on Friday coming to take my car. "What do we do about the buyer?" I asked. "They're going to show up expecting a Mustang. They have a bill of sale." "A bill of sale for what?" Thomas countered. "He would have had to put a VIN on it. It would be the VIN for the sedan. The moment the driver checks the VIN on the Mustang, they'll know it's the wrong car. But we can't risk them trying to take it anyway or causing a scene." This brought us to the buyer. The auction site listed the winner's username, but no real name. However, my father, in his haste, had made another mistake. He had forwarded me a copy of the transaction receipt via email with a curt message. "For your records, the funds will be deposited into your trust." He likely did it as a final twist of the knife, a way to show me exactly how much my hobby was worth to him in cash. But on that receipt, nestled in the fine print, was the buyer's name and the city they were from. "Jessica Riley," I read aloud, "from a town about an hour north of here." Thomas immediately pulled out his laptop and started searching. A few minutes later, he found her. Jessica Riley was not some anonymous car collector. She was the owner of a prestigious art gallery in her town, a well-respected figure in the arts community. There were articles about her, interviews where she talked about her passion for things that told a story, whether it was a painting or a beautifully designed machine. "This is good," Thomas said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "This is very, very good. She's not just some guy looking to flip a car. She's an appreciator. She's a professional who values authenticity and provenance. She is going to be furious when she finds out she's been conned." Our strategy began to shift. This wasn't just about protecting the Mustang anymore. This was about justice. We had two goals: first, to intercept the process and ensure my car never left my possession. Second, to make my father answer for what he had done. Thomas's legal mind was already several steps ahead. "We can't just call her and say, 'You've been had,'" he reasoned. "She might think we're part of the scam. We need to approach this carefully. We need to present an airtight case." The flaw in my father's plan was his assumption that he was the only intelligent person in the equation. He saw me as a naive child and the buyer as a faceless wallet. He never imagined we might communicate, that we might compare notes and find the gaping holes in his story. He had built a house of cards on a foundation of lies, and we were about to introduce a strong gust of wind. Thomas spent the rest of the afternoon drafting a formal letter. It was a masterpiece of legal precision and careful wording. It laid out the facts clearly and unemotionally: that Ms. Riley had purchased a car based on fraudulent advertising, that the vehicle she was scheduled to pick up was not the one depicted, and that the vehicle depicted, the 1968 Mustang, was the legal property of his client, Holly Anderson. He attached copies of the Mustang's title, the fraudulent ad, and a current photo of the gray sedan, complete with its license plate and VIN visible. The letter didn't make threats. It simply stated the facts and proposed a meeting to resolve the discrepancy to the satisfaction of all parties involved before any further legal action was taken. "We'll email this to the gallery's main address," Thomas said. "It's professional. It shows we're serious. And it gives her the information she needs to realize she's the victim here, not the aggressor." The final piece of the plan was a preemptive strike. On my way home, I stopped by my garage. With a heavy heart, I disconnected the Mustang's battery and removed the distributor cap. I tucked the small, essential piece of the engine into my pocket. Even if someone did manage to get into the garage and try to hotwire it, the car wasn't going anywhere. It was a small act of defiance, but it made me feel like I was taking back control, one component at a time. I went home that night, and for the first time in days, I slept soundly. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. My father had started a war, but he had underestimated his enemy. He had forgotten that I, like the car he so disdained, had been quietly rebuilding myself for years, getting stronger, waiting for the moment to turn the key and roar to life. The email was sent the next morning. The subject line was simple and professional: "Urgent matter regarding your recent vehicle purchase." We attached the carefully prepared PDF and a short, polite message inviting Ms. Riley to contact Thomas at her earliest convenience. Then, we waited. The silence was deafening. Every ping from my phone made me jump. Had she received it? Did she think it was a hoax? Was she already on the phone with my father, who would undoubtedly spin a web of lies to discredit me? Thomas was the calm one. "Give it time," he advised over the phone. "She's a business owner, she's probably busy. When she sees it, she'll know it's serious. The evidence is undeniable." He was right. The call came just after noon. It was Jessica Riley herself. Her voice was exactly as I had imagined: cultured, intelligent, and radiating a controlled fury. "Mr. Bell," she said, her tone icy, "I have just read your email. I am sitting here looking at a wire transfer confirmation for a significant amount of money for a 1968 Mustang, and you are telling me I have actually purchased a common sedan." Thomas handled the call with professional grace, putting her on speakerphone so I could listen. He calmly walked her through the evidence again, expressing our sincerest apologies that she had been caught in the middle of what he termed a complex family dispute and a clear case of commercial fraud. I listened as Jessica's anger slowly morphed into a strategic alliance. "This Colin Anderson," she said, her voice laced with contempt. "He was so smooth, so charming on the phone. He told me the car belonged to his artist daughter who didn't appreciate its value. He said he was selling it on her behalf to ensure it went to a good home. I felt a fresh wave of sickness. He had used a twisted version of the truth to build his lie, painting me as a flighty, ungrateful child. I am the daughter, I said, speaking up for the first time. And that car is the most important thing I own. I restored every inch of it myself. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I see, Jessica said, her tone softening slightly. Then you and I have a mutual interest in resolving this. I am not interested in your family drama, but I am very interested in getting my money back from the man who tried to swindle me. The transport truck is scheduled to arrive at your address on Friday at 10 a.m. What do you propose we do? This was the moment our plan solidified. It was no longer just about stopping the truck. It was about orchestrating a confrontation. We believe my father is flying into New York tomorrow to finalize the sale of his house before leaving the country for good, I explained. He'll be back in town for less than 48 hours. He and his wife have purchased a new luxury condo downtown as a pied-à-terre, Thomas added. He's arrogant. He'll want to be there to oversee the handover of the car to make sure his plan goes off without a hitch. A new idea, audacious and theatrical, began to form in my mind. My father loved an audience. He thrived on public displays of power, so I would give him one. Only this time, he wouldn't be the one directing the show. Ms. Riley, I began, I know this is a huge ask, but would you be willing to proceed with the pickup on Friday as planned? Thomas shot me a questioning look, but I held up a hand. Let the truck arrive. Let my father be there, thinking he's about to watch the final piece of his old life get hauled away. But instead of picking up the car, you'll be there. And Thomas will be there as my legal counsel. And we will confront him, all of us, together. There was a long silence on the line. I held my breath, worried I had overplayed my hand. But then Jessica Riley laughed. It was a dry, appreciative sound. Young lady, she said, I own an art gallery. I understand the power of performance. Staging a public fall for a man like that, it's a form of art I can get behind. I'll be there. Just tell me where and when. The rest of the day was a blur of preparation. Thomas drafted a formal demand letter for Jessica to serve to my father, demanding an immediate and full refund of the wire transfer, citing the specific statutes of fraud he had violated. It also included a clause demanding an additional sum for emotional distress and punitive damages, a bold move that Thomas called putting him on the back foot. Meanwhile, I had my own part to play. I called the rental company that managed the garage and told them I would be moving out at the end of the week. Then I called a tow truck company, a different one, and arranged for them to move the Mustang, but not to a new garage. I had a better idea. Thomas had a cousin who managed events at one of the city's most exclusive hotels, the very same one where my father often entertained his clients. It had a small, private courtyard at the entrance, often used for valet parking for VIPs. With a little persuasion and a promise of a future design project, I arranged to have the Mustang delivered there early Friday morning, to be parked in the most prominent spot, right by the entrance. It would be waiting there, gleaming under the morning sun like a piece of high-performance sculpture. The final step was the most difficult. I had to see my father. He and Brenda would be landing tomorrow. He would expect me to be a wreck, either begging him to reconsider or screaming at him over the phone. I would do neither. I sent him a single, simple text message. Heard you're back in town. I'll be at the garage on Friday at 10 a.m. to hand over the keys. Let's just get this over with. His reply was instantaneous and dripping with condescension. A wise decision, Holly. Glad to see you're finally being sensible. Brenda and I will be there to supervise. The stage was set. The actors knew their parts. My father thought he was attending the final scene of his masterpiece of control. He had no idea he was walking into a trap, one that I had built with the same care and precision I had used to rebuild my car, piece by painful piece. The fall was coming, and I wanted a front row seat. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of bright, optimistic day that felt completely at odds with the storm that was about to break. I was at the garage by 9, but it was empty. The Mustang was already gone, safely delivered to the hotel courtyard, a ticking time bomb of truth waiting to detonate. All that remained was the boring gray sedan, parked innocently in the corner, looking more pathetic than ever. It was the physical manifestation of my father's lie. At 9:45, Thomas arrived, dressed in a sharp, dark suit that made him look a decade older and twice as intimidating. He carried a leather briefcase containing the demand letter and copies of all our evidence. He gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, my heart pounding a steady, rhythmic drum against my ribs. "Ready." A few minutes later, Jessica Riley pulled up in a sleek black car. She stepped out, a woman in her mid-40s radiating an aura of calm, expensive power. She was dressed in a chic pantsuit, her expression unreadable. She shook my hand firmly. "Holly, I'm sorry we have to meet under these circumstances, but I'm looking forward to the resolution." The flatbed truck from the transport company arrived exactly at 9:55, pulling up to the curb with a hiss of air brakes. The driver, a burly man with a clipboard, hopped out, looking expectantly at the garage door. The final actor had taken his place. At precisely 10 a.m., a black town car glided to a stop behind the flatbed. My father emerged from the passenger side, followed by Brenda. He was the picture of success, dressed in a tailored suit, his face set in a look of magnanimous authority. Brenda, adorned in jewelry, looked around at the gritty industrial neighborhood with a moue of distaste. Colin strode towards me, a triumphant smile on his lips. "Holly," he said, his voice booming slightly. "I'm so glad you decided not to be difficult. This is for the best, a clean break." He glanced past me, expecting to see the Mustang. His eyes fell on the gray sedan. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, but he quickly masked it. "Ah, yes, well, let's get it loaded up. The new owner is eager to receive it." He turned to the truck driver, ready to issue his orders, the king surveying his domain. But before he could speak, Jessica Riley stepped forward. "I believe I'm the new owner," she said, her voice cutting through the air like glass. "And I think there has been a serious misunderstanding." My father's head snapped. Towards her, he hadn't noticed her standing there. He plastered on his charming, disarming smile. "Ms. Riley, what a surprise. I wasn't expecting you to come in person. A pleasure to meet you. As you can see, we're all ready for you." "Are we?" Jessica replied, her voice dangerously soft. She held up her phone, displaying the auction page with its stunning photos of my Mustang. "This is the car I paid for, Mr. Anderson. A 1968 midnight blue Mustang. What I see in that garage," she gestured dismissively at the sedan, "is not that." My father's smile faltered. He looked from the phone to the sedan, then to me, a dark, angry realization dawning in his eyes. "This is just a small mix-up," he blustered, trying to regain control. "Holly has two cars. The driver is simply here for the wrong one." "No," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the sudden silence. "He's here for the only car you could legally sell, the one registered in your name." I held up the keys to the sedan and tossed them onto its hood. They landed with a cheap, plastic clatter. The sound seemed to echo in the quiet street. Brenda looked utterly bewildered, her perfectly painted face a mask of confusion. "Colin, what is going on?" she demanded. This was not the smooth, effortless transaction she had been promised. This was messy. It was public. Thomas chose that moment to step forward, his presence shifting the entire dynamic. "Mr. Anderson," he began, his voice calm and authoritative. "My name is Thomas Bell. I am Ms. Holly Anderson's legal counsel." He opened his briefcase and produced the letter. "This is a formal demand on behalf of Ms. Jessica Riley for the immediate return of her full payment, plus damages, on the grounds of wire fraud, false advertising, and deceptive trade practices." It also contains a cease and desist, demanding you halt all claims of ownership or control over Ms. Anderson's legally owned property, specifically the 1968 Mustang VIN number. He read the number aloud from the paper, "A vehicle to which you have no legal title." My father stared at the letter as if it were a venomous snake. His face had gone from tan to a pale, sickly white. He was speechless. All his life, he had been the one with the lawyers, the one serving the papers, the one dictating the terms. He was a predator, and for the first time, he was being treated like prey. "This is ridiculous," he finally sputtered, turning on me. "You put them up to this, after everything I've done for you." "What have you done for me?" I shot back, the words I had swallowed for years finally pouring out. You tried to sell my soul to fund your new life. You lied to me, you lied to Ms. Riley, and you did it all without a shred of remorse. I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. But you forgot one thing, Dad. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of fury and fear. What are you talking about? He whispered, echoing his words from the phone call. I let a slow, genuine smile spread across my face. You forgot that the car you sold, the one whose value you stole, wasn't actually the one you thought it was, and you forgot something else. I pulled out my phone and held it up. It was open to a live video feed, pointed directly at him. You forgot that in today's world, everyone loves a good story. And the story of a wealthy investment banker committing fraud against his own daughter, that's a story people will want to hear. I wasn't actually recording, but he didn't know that. The bluff was enough. The color drained completely from his face. He looked at Jessica, who was watching him with cold disgust. He looked at Thomas, the embodiment of a legal system he could no longer manipulate. He looked at Brenda, who was staring at him as if he were a stranger. The kingdom he had built on control and intimidation had crumbled, and he was standing alone in the ruins. The keys to that kingdom, he now realized, had never truly been his. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. My father, a man who always had a response, a strategy, a countermove, had nothing. He was cornered, exposed, and for the first time in his life, utterly powerless. The blustering rage drained out of him, replaced by the hollow look of defeat. Brenda was the first to break. "Colin," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "What did you do? Fraud? Is he telling the truth?" She wasn't asking because she cared about the morality of it. She was calculating the social and financial fallout. A scandal like this would tarnish the flawless image she had so carefully curated. This was a stain that no amount of interior design could cover up. "It's a misunderstanding," he mumbled, but the words lacked any conviction. Jessica Riley stepped forward again, her patience clearly gone. "There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Anderson. You committed a crime. You defrauded me. I have the bank records, the emails, and the advertisement. According to this letter from Mr. Bell, you have 24 hours to wire my money back in full, along with the additional $10,000 for damages, or he will be filing a report with the district attorney's office and a civil suit that will make this little street-side drama look like a pleasant memory. Do you understand?" He understood. The threat of official, public, legal consequences was the only language he truly respected. He gave a jerky nod, unable to even look at her. He had been outmaneuvered by a gallery owner, a law student, and the daughter he had dismissed as a naive artist. The humiliation was a palpable thing, hanging in the air around him. He turned to me, his eyes pleading for the first time I could ever remember. "Holly," he started, but I cut him off. "There's nothing left to say," I said, my voice devoid of the anger I'd felt before. All I felt now was a profound, cleansing emptiness. "You made your decisions, now you get to live with them." I turned my back on him, a gesture more final than any argument, and walked over to Thomas and Jessica. "Thank you both," I said quietly. "I couldn't have done this without you." Jessica gave me a small, genuine smile. The pleasure was all mine. Men like that deserve to be held accountable. "And for what it's worth," she added, her eyes twinkling, "you have excellent taste in cars. If you ever do decide to sell, you have my number." With that, she turned and got into her car, driving away without a backward glance. The transport truck driver, who had been watching the entire exchange with wide-eyed fascination, shrugged, climbed back into his cab, and drove off, his job for the day unexpectedly canceled. Colin and Brenda were left standing alone on the sidewalk, a king and queen with no castle. I watched as they had a hushed, furious argument before getting back into their town car and speeding away, not toward a new life in London, but toward a future of legal troubles and shattered reputations. Thomas put a hand on my shoulder. "You did it," he said, his voice full of pride. "You're free." The word hung in the air, feeling both strange and wonderful. Free. I was. The financial ties, the emotional manipulation, the weight of his expectations, it was all gone. Severed. I had lost a father, but I had gained myself. Later that afternoon, I met Thomas at the hotel. There, in the center of the courtyard, was my Mustang. It looked magnificent, a beacon of defiant beauty against the backdrop of sterile corporate luxury. I had the keys in my hand, the real keys this time. "What now?" Thomas asked, leaning against the polished fender. "Now," I said, a real, unforced smile finally reaching my face, "I start over, on my own terms." The first step was practical. I used the money I had saved from my freelance work, the secret money he never knew about, to put a deposit on a new apartment in a different part of the city. It was smaller than my old place, but it was all mine. I spent the next few days moving my things, feeling a lightness with every box I packed. I was shedding my old life, my old identity as Colin Anderson's daughter. When the wire transfer confirmation from Jessica to my father, and then from my father back to her, was forwarded to us by her lawyer, I knew the final chain had been broken. Colin had paid. He had met the demands to avoid prosecution. I never heard from him directly again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he and Brenda did not move to London. The scandal, though contained, had damaged his reputation at the firm. They sold their new condo and moved to a smaller home in a different state, fading into a quiet, disgraced obscurity. A month later, I was sitting with Thomas at a small cafe, showing him the final branding for my new business. On the front of the business card was the name, Phoenix Designs. Underneath was a stylized logo of a Mustang. He grinned. "I love it," he said, "rising from the ashes." "Something like that," I replied, feeling a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. More like just finally getting to drive my own car. After we left the cafe, we walked back to the Mustang. I slid into the driver's seat, the familiar feel of the worn leather a comfort and a promise. Thomas got in beside me. I turned the key, and the engine roared to life, a deep, powerful sound that was the anthem of my newfound freedom. As I pulled out onto the street, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a moment, I saw the reflection of the city, of the life I was leaving behind. But then I looked forward, at the open road stretching out before me, a future I would design myself. And for the first time, I wasn't looking back. I was just driving,